Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet type. At 17, she preferred books to parties and running trails to shopping malls. When her father's job transferred their family from the small town of Cedar Rapids to the sprawling suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, Sarah knew the transition would be difficult. What she didn't expect was how cruel some teenagers could be to someone who was different. The Martinez family had moved into their new home on Maple Street just 2 weeks before Sarah's senior year was set to begin. The house was nice enough, a modest 2-story with a small backyard that backed up to a network of desert hiking trails. Sarah's parents, both hard-working people who had immigrated from Mexico 20 years earlier, had saved for years to afford this move. Her father, Miguel, had been offered a promotion at the engineering firm where he worked, and her mother, Rosa, was excited about the opportunity to start fresh in a new city. Sarah spent most of those 2 weeks before school exploring the neighborhood on foot. She had been a cross-country runner back in Cedar Rapids, and running was her way of dealing with stress and anxiety. The desert landscape was foreign to her, but beautiful in its own way. The mornings were cool enough to run, and she discovered a network of trails that wound through the desert preserve behind their neighborhood. On one of these morning runs, she noticed she wasn't alone on the trails. There was an older man, probably in his 30s, who seemed to run the same route she did, but much earlier. She would catch glimpses of him finishing his run as she was just starting hers. He was tall and lean, with short-cropped hair and a disciplined way of moving that reminded her of the military documentaries her father liked to watch. He always nodded politely when their paths crossed, but they never spoke. The first day of school at Desert Vista High School was everything Sarah had feared it would be. The campus was enormous, much larger than her old school, with over 2,000 students. The hallways were crowded and noisy, filled with groups of friends who had known each other for years. Sarah clutched her schedule and tried to navigate the maze of buildings, feeling invisible and overwhelmed. Her first few classes went smoothly enough. The teachers were professional, the coursework seemed manageable, and she managed to find each classroom without being late. It was at lunch that things began to go wrong. The cafeteria was a massive space filled with round tables, each one seeming to represent a different social group. Sarah grabbed a sandwich and a bottle of water and looked around for an empty spot. She found a table near the windows where only 2 other students were sitting, both of them absorbed in their phones. As she sat down, she couldn't help but notice a group of students at a nearby table who were talking loudly and laughing. There were 4 of them, 3 girls and 1 boy, all of them dressed in expensive clothes and sporting the kind of confident attitudes that suggested they were part of the school's social elite. The apparent leader of the group was a girl named Madison Foster. Sarah had heard her name mentioned in several classes already. Madison was tall and blonde, with perfectly applied makeup and a smile that never seemed to reach her eyes. She came from one of Phoenix's wealthiest families, and she had the kind of natural charisma that drew other students to her like moths to a flame. Sitting next to Madison was her best friend, Ashley Chen, a petite girl with long black hair who seemed to worship everything Madison said and did. Across from them sat Brittany Williams, a redhead who was known for her sharp tongue and cruel sense of humor. The only boy in the group was Tyler Morrison, Madison's on-and-off boyfriend, who was the starting quarterback for the school's football team. Sarah tried to eat her lunch in peace, but she couldn't help overhearing their conversation. They were talking about someone's Instagram posts, making fun of another student's outfit, and generally engaging in the kind of petty gossip that seemed to fuel their social lives. She was doing her best to ignore them when she heard Madison's voice rise slightly. "Oh my God, look at that girl over there," Madison said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Is she seriously wearing that to school?" Sarah glanced up and realized with horror that Madison was looking directly at her. She looked down at her own outfit, a simple pair of jeans and a t-shirt that had been perfectly acceptable at her old school. Suddenly, she felt underdressed and conspicuous. "Who is she?" Ashley asked, also staring in Sarah's direction. "I've never seen her before." "Probably some transfer student," Brittany said with a sneer. "Look at those shoes. Are those from Walmart?" Tyler laughed. "Dude, she looks scared. Like a deer in headlights." Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She finished her sandwich quickly and gathered her things, eager to escape their attention. As she stood up to leave, she heard Madison's voice again. "Someone should tell her this isn't a farm town. We have standards here." The laughter that followed echoed in Sarah's ears as she hurried out of the cafeteria. She spent the rest of lunch in the library, trying to focus on homework and forget about the encounter. The afternoon classes were no better. Word seemed to have spread about the new girl who didn't fit in, and Sarah found herself the subject of whispered conversations and pointed looks. By the time the final bell rang, she was ready to run home and never come back. But instead of going straight home, Sarah decided to go for a run. Physical activity had always been her way of dealing with stress, and she needed to clear her head before facing her parents, who would undoubtedly ask about her first day. She changed into her running clothes and set out for the desert trails. The afternoon heat was intense, but she didn't care. She needed to feel her feet hitting the ground, needed to feel her lungs burning, needed to feel like she had some control over something in her life. The trail she chose was one she had run several times during her exploration of the neighborhood. It wound through the desert preserve for about 3 miles, offering scenic views of the surrounding mountains and plenty of solitude. She had never encountered other runners on this particular trail during the afternoon hours. That's why she was surprised when she heard footsteps behind her about a mile into her run. She glanced over her shoulder and felt her heart sink. It was Tyler Morrison and 2 other boys from the football team, Jake Martinez and Connor Davis. They were running behind her, but they were clearly not dressed for a serious workout. They wore jeans and sneakers, and they were laughing and talking loudly as they jogged. Sarah picked up her pace, hoping they would get bored and turn back. But instead they seemed to speed up as well, staying about 50 yards behind her. She could hear them talking about her, making comments about her form and her appearance that made her skin crawl. "Hey, new girl!" Tyler called out. "Wait up! We just want to talk!" Sarah ignored them and kept running. The trail here was narrow, winding through a section of desert that was thick with cacti and desert shrubs. On either side of the path, the terrain was rocky and uneven, making it impossible to leave the trail without risking injury. "Come on, don't be antisocial," Jake yelled. "We're trying to be friendly." Their version of friendly apparently included making crude comments about her body and her running style. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm and keep moving. The trail would eventually loop back toward the neighborhood, and once she was in a more populated area, she would be safe. But as the trail rounded a bend and entered a particularly isolated section surrounded by tall desert brush, the 3 boys suddenly sprinted forward, closing the gap between them. Sarah heard their footsteps getting closer and tried to speed up, but it was too late. Tyler reached her first, running up alongside her on the narrow trail. "Seriously, we just want to welcome you to the neighborhood," he said with a grin that made Sarah's stomach turn. "I'm fine, thank you," Sarah managed to say without breaking stride. "I need to get home." "What's the rush?" Connor asked, appearing on her other side. Now she was boxed in, with Tyler on her left, Connor on her right, and Jake running close behind. "My parents are expecting me," Sarah said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "Your parents don't have to know you were late," Tyler said. "We could show you some of the better trails, places the locals go." Sarah shook her head. "I really need to go home." That's when Jake, who had been running behind her, suddenly moved closer. Sarah felt his foot hit her heel, and she stumbled forward, her arms windmilling as she tried to keep her balance. "Oops," Jake said with mock concern. "Sorry about that. These trails can be tricky." Sarah regained her footing and kept running, but now she was genuinely scared. These boys weren't just being friendly or even just being jerks. There was something predatory in their behavior that set off every alarm bell in her head. "You know," Tyler continued, still keeping pace with her, "Madison was right about you. You could use some help fitting in around here. We could help you with that." "I don't need any help," Sarah said firmly. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Connor said, "especially when they're new and don't understand how things work." They were approaching another bend in the trail, and Sarah could see that ahead the path narrowed even more, squeezed between two large boulders. Her heart was pounding now, and not just from the exertion of running. As they approached the narrow section, Jake moved up beside her again. This time, his accidental contact was more deliberate. He bumped into her shoulder, causing her to veer toward the edge of the trail. "Careful," he said with a smirk. "You wouldn't want to fall." That's when Sarah realized they weren't planning to just harass her. They were planning to hurt her. The isolation of this section of trail, the way they had boxed her in, the escalating physical contact. It was all building toward something worse. She tried to sprint ahead, hoping to reach the more open section of trail where she might have room to maneuver. But as she accelerated, Jake suddenly thrust his leg out in front of her. Sarah's foot caught his ankle, and this time there was no recovering her balance. She went down hard, her hands and knees skidding across the rocky ground as she fell. Pain shot through her palms and shins as the rough surface tore through her skin. The three boys stopped running and gathered around her as she tried to get back to her feet. Her hands were bleeding, her knees were scraped, and she could feel tears of pain and humiliation starting to form in her eyes. "Wow, you really should be more careful," Tyler said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "These desert trails are dangerous for someone who's not used to them." Sarah struggled to stand, wincing as she put weight on her injured knee. "Just leave me alone," she said, her voice shaking. "We're just trying to help," Connor said, "but you don't seem very grateful." "Maybe she needs a lesson in manners," Jake added, taking a step closer. Sarah backed away, but there wasn't far to go. The trail was narrow here, and the desert brush on either side was thick with thorns and sharp rocks. She was trapped, injured, and alone with three boys who clearly meant her harm. That's when they all heard the sound of footsteps approaching from the direction Sarah had come. Someone else was on the trail, someone running at a steady, disciplined pace that was rapidly approaching their location. The boys exchanged glances, suddenly looking less confident. Tyler moved closer to Sarah, and for a moment she thought he was going to grab her. "Remember what we talked about," he said quietly, his voice now carrying a clear threat. "About fitting in and understanding how things work around here." Then the footsteps rounded the bend, and Sarah saw the runner she had noticed on her morning runs. He was older than she had realized up close, probably in his mid-30s, with short gray-streaked hair and intense blue eyes. He was tall and lean, with the kind of muscular build that suggested years of serious physical training. But it was the way he carried himself that caught Sarah's attention. There was something about his posture, his alertness, his immediate assessment of the situation that suggested this was not someone to be taken lightly. The man stopped running when he saw the group. His eyes took in the scene quickly. Sarah on the ground with scraped hands and knees, the three boys standing over her, the isolated location, the obvious tension in the air. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. Tyler straightened up, putting on his most innocent expression. "Yeah, everything's fine. She just tripped. We were helping her up." The man's eyes moved to Sarah, and she saw something in his expression, a recognition, perhaps, or a understanding of what was really happening. "Miss, are you all right?" Sarah looked at Tyler, who was staring at her with barely concealed menace, then back at the stranger. Something in his steady gaze gave her courage. "I fell," she said simply. "They were bothering me." The man nodded once, his expression not changing, but Sarah sensed a shift in his demeanor. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more commanding. "I think you boys should head back to town now," he said. Jake laughed nervously. "We're just running, man. It's a free trail." "It is," the man agreed, "and I'm suggesting you run somewhere else." There was something in his tone that made all three boys take a step back. Tyler tried to maintain his bravado. "Look, old man, we weren't doing anything wrong. If you have a problem, I don't have a problem," the man interrupted, his voice still quiet, but with an edge that made Tyler's words die in his throat. "But if I see you bothering this young lady again, then we'll have a conversation. And trust me, that's not a conversation you want to have." The three boys stood there for a moment, clearly weighing their options. They outnumbered the stranger 3-1, and they were younger. But there was something about the man's calm confidence that made them reconsider. Connor was the first to break. "Come on, guys, let's just go. We have practice anyway." Tyler looked like he wanted to argue, but Jake was already backing away. "Yeah, whatever, this is stupid." As they turned to leave, Tyler shot one last look at Sarah. "See you at school," he said, and the way he said it made it sound like a promise rather than a friendly goodbye. The man watched them go until they disappeared around the bend, then turned his attention to Sarah. "Let me help you up," he said, extending a hand. Sarah accepted his help, wincing as she put weight on her scraped knee. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "I think you do know," the man said gently. "Are you hurt badly?" Sarah looked down at her hands and knees. The scrapes were painful but not serious. "I'll be okay. Just scraped up." "I'm Marcus Reed," the man said. "I live in the neighborhood. I've seen you running in the mornings." "Sarah Martinez. We just moved here." Marcus nodded. "How long have those boys been bothering you?" "Today was the first day," Sarah said. "Well, the first day they followed me. They were making fun of me at lunch." Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "They followed you from school?" "I think so. I don't know how else they would have known I was out here." Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking back in the direction the boys had gone. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "Do you want me to walk you home? Make sure you get there safely?" Sarah considered this. She was still shaken by what had happened, and the idea of finishing her run alone didn't appeal to her. "Would you mind?" "I live just at the edge of the neighborhood." "Not at all," Marcus said. "We should also clean up those scrapes when we get there. Desert trails are dirty, and you don't want them to get infected." As they began walking back along the trail, Sarah found herself curious about this man who had appeared at exactly the right moment. There was something about him that suggested he was used to dealing with dangerous situations. "Thank you again," she said as they walked. "I was really scared." "You should have been," Marcus said bluntly. "Those boys weren't planning anything good." "How did you know to come this way?" Sarah asked. Marcus glanced at her. "I run these trails every day. I know the patterns, know when something's not right. When I saw those three jogging after you, it didn't look like a coincidence." "You were watching?" "I was finishing my own run when I saw them leave the school parking lot and head toward the trails. Like I said, it didn't look like a coincidence." Sarah felt a chill as she realized how deliberate the encounter had been. Those boys hadn't just happened to be on the trails. They had followed her specifically. "What should I do?" she asked. "About school, I mean. I still have to see them every day." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Have you told your parents what happened?" "Not yet. I don't want them to worry. They worked so hard to get us moved here." "Sarah," Marcus said, stopping and turning to face her. "This isn't your fault. And it's not something you should handle alone." "I know, but—" "No buts," Marcus said firmly. This is serious. Those boys targeted you, followed you to an isolated location, and physically assaulted you. That's not bullying. That's criminal behavior. The word criminal hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She had been thinking of it as an extreme case of bullying, but hearing it described that way made her realize how much danger she had actually been in. "What do you think I should do?" she asked quietly. "Tell your parents," Marcus said immediately. "Tell them everything. And tomorrow, you need to report what happened to the school administration." "But what if that just makes it worse? What if they retaliate?" Marcus's expression grew hard. "Then they'll have to deal with me." There was something in the way he said it that made Sarah believe he could handle whatever Tyler and his friends might try to do. "Are you military?" she asked. Marcus smiled slightly, the first time she had seen him do so. "Former Navy SEAL, 20 years active duty. Now I work private security." That explained the way he carried himself, the immediate assessment of the situation, the calm authority in his voice. Sarah felt a wave of relief knowing that someone with that kind of background was looking out for her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "I mean, I'm grateful, but you don't even know me." Marcus resumed walking, considering his answer. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "She's about your age. If she were in a situation like this, I'd hope someone would step in to help." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, approaching the edge of the neighborhood. Sarah felt safer than she had all day, but she was dreading having to explain to her parents what had happened. "Marcus," she said as they neared her street. "Yeah? Those boys, do you think they'll really leave me alone now?" Marcus stopped walking again and looked at her seriously. "Honestly, I don't know. Bullies like that usually look for easy targets. You stood up to them today by telling me the truth about what happened. That might be enough to make them back off. And if it's not, then we'll deal with that when it happens," Marcus said. "But Sarah, I want you to understand something. You're not defenseless. What happened today doesn't define you." "I felt helpless," Sarah admitted. "You were outnumbered and caught off guard," Marcus said. "But you kept your head. You looked for help when it came, and you told the truth about what happened. That takes courage." As they reached Sarah's street, she felt a mix of gratitude and apprehension. She was safe for now, but tomorrow she would have to go back to school and face Tyler and his friends again. "I want to give you my number," Marcus said as they stopped in front of her house. "If anything like this happens again, if those boys bother you at all, I want you to call me immediately." Sarah nodded and took out her phone to save his contact information. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." "Just remember what we talked about," Marcus said. "Tell your parents. Report it to the school. Don't try to handle this alone." As Sarah walked up to her front door, she knew that her life had changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. The encounter on the trail had been terrifying, but it had also shown her that there were people willing to stand up for what was right. She just hoped that would be enough to protect her from what was coming next. That evening, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her parents, picking at her mother's homemade enchiladas while trying to find the courage to tell them what had happened. Her scraped hands and knees had been cleaned and bandaged, but she had explained them away as a simple fall during her run. Rosa Martinez noticed her daughter's lack of appetite immediately. "Mija, you're not eating. Was your first day at school that bad?" Miguel looked up from his plate, concern creasing his weathered face. "How was it, Sarah? Did you make any friends?" Sarah's throat felt tight. Her parents had worked so hard to give her this opportunity, had sacrificed so much for the move to Phoenix. The last thing she wanted was to burden them with problems on her very first day. "It was fine," she said quietly, "just different from Cedar Rapids." But Rosa had raised 3 children and had developed a mother's intuition for when something was wrong. She reached across the table and gently touched Sarah's bandaged hand. Those are deep scrapes, mija. You said you fell? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Miguel set down his fork and studied his daughter's face. As an engineer, he was trained to notice details, and the details he was seeing now didn't add up. Sarah, where exactly did you fall? Those trails you've been running are pretty smooth. The kindness in her father's voice broke something inside Sarah. Before she knew it, tears were streaming down her face, and the whole story came tumbling out. She told them about the lunch encounter with Madison and her friends, about feeling out of place and conspicuous, about the 3 boys following her on the trail. When she got to the part about being tripped deliberately, Rosa gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Miguel's face grew dark with anger. They did this on purpose? Rosa asked, reaching for Sarah's hands. They hurt you intentionally? Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I was so scared, Mom. If Marcus hadn't shown up... Who is Marcus? Miguel asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. Sarah explained about the neighbor who had intervened, about his military background, about how he had insisted she tell her parents everything that had happened. This Marcus, Rosa said. He helped you? Yes, he made them leave. He walked me home to make sure I was safe. Miguel stood up from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. We need to call the police. This is assault. Those boys attacked you. No, Dad, please, Sarah said quickly. Marcus said I should report it to the school first. He said involving the police right away might make things worse. Worse? Miguel's voice was rising. How could it be worse than our daughter being attacked on her first day in a new town? Rosa placed a calming hand on her husband's arm. Miguel, sit down. Let's think about this. But Miguel was pacing now, his engineer's mind working through the problem. We moved here for opportunities, for safety. If children can't even go to school without being attacked... Dad, please, Sarah interrupted. Marcus knows about these things. He said I should try the school first, see if they can handle it. If they can't, then we can involve the police. Rosa looked at her daughter with worried eyes. You trust this, Marcus? Sarah thought about the calm authority in Marcus's voice, the way he had immediately assessed the situation and taken control. Yes, I do. He knows what he's talking about. Miguel finally sat back down, but his hands were clenched into fists on the table. I don't like this, Sarah. I don't like that you were hurt. And I don't like having to depend on strangers to protect you. You're not depending on him, Sarah said. I am. And only until we figure out how to handle this. The family spent the rest of the evening discussing options. Rosa wanted to homeschool Sarah for the rest of the year. Miguel wanted to march into the school the next morning and demand justice. But Sarah, with Marcus's advice echoing in her mind, convinced them to let her try reporting it through proper channels first. One day, Miguel said finally, we give the school 1 day to handle this properly. If they don't, we're involving the police and considering other options. That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept replaying the events on the trail, wondering what would have happened if Marcus hadn't appeared. But she also found herself thinking about his words. You're not defenseless. What happened today doesn't define you. The next morning, Sarah arrived at school early and went straight to the main office. She asked to speak with the principal, Mr. Davidson, and was told he could see her before first period. Mr. Davidson was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a distracted manner that suggested he dealt with student problems all day long. When Sarah entered his office, he gestured for her to sit down while he finished typing something on his computer. Now then, miss, he said, finally looking up and consulting a note on his desk. Martinez, right? You're new here. What can I do for you? Sarah took a deep breath and began telling her story. She tried to stick to facts, describing the lunch incident and then the encounter on the trail in as much detail as she could remember. When she finished, Mr. Davidson leaned back in his chair and frowned. These are serious allegations, Miss Martinez. You're claiming that Tyler Morrison and his friends deliberately assaulted you? Yes, sir. They followed me from school to the trails, and one of them tripped me on purpose. Did anyone witness this alleged assault? A neighbor named Marcus Reed. He saw the whole thing and made them leave. Mr. Davidson made a note on a pad of paper. And you said this happened yesterday afternoon on the Desert Preserve trails? Yes, sir. Miss Martinez, you realize that what happens off school property is generally not within the school's jurisdiction? Sarah felt her heart sink. But they followed me from school, and the bullying started here, in the cafeteria. Alleged bullying, Mr. Davidson corrected. You said they made comments about your appearance at lunch. While that's certainly not nice, it's not necessarily actionable. What about the assault on the trail? If an assault actually occurred, that would be a matter for local law enforcement, not the school. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. So you're not going to do anything? I didn't say that, Mr. Davidson said, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly inclined to help. I'll speak with the students involved and get their side of the story. But Miss Martinez, I have to tell you, Tyler Morrison is one of our best students. He's the starting quarterback, honor roll, never been in serious trouble. Same with Jake Martinez and Connor Davis. Jake Martinez? Sarah asked. No relation, I assume. It's a common name. The point is, these are good kids from good families. I find it hard to believe they would do what you're describing. Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. Are you saying I'm lying? I'm saying that sometimes new students misinterpret social dynamics. Maybe what you perceived as bullying was actually an attempt to be friendly. Maybe what happened on the trail was an accident that got blown out of proportion. I have scrapes on my hands and knees from when they tripped me. You said you fell. People fall while running all the time. Sarah stood up, realizing that this conversation was going nowhere. Will you at least talk to them? I'll have conversations with all the students involved, Mr. Davidson said. But Miss Martinez, I strongly advise you to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. False allegations can have serious consequences for everyone involved. As Sarah left the principal's office, she felt more discouraged than ever. It was clear that Mr. Davidson had no intention of taking her seriously, and his warning about false accusations felt more like a threat than advice. She made it through her first 3 classes in a haze of anxiety, constantly looking over her shoulder for Tyler and his friends. She didn't see them until lunch, when she spotted them at their usual table in the cafeteria. Madison Foster was there too, along with Ashley and Brittany. They were all laughing about something, and when Madison caught sight of Sarah, she said something to the others that made them all turn to look in her direction. Tyler stood up from the table and began walking toward where Sarah was sitting. Her heart started pounding, and she looked around for teachers or other adults, but the lunch supervisors were all at the other end of the large room. Hey, Sarah, Tyler said when he reached her table, his voice friendly but his eyes cold. I heard you had a conversation with Mr. Davidson this morning. Sarah didn't respond, but Tyler sat down across from her anyway. The thing is, he continued, Mr. Davidson called me into his office right after you left. He wanted to ask me about some story you told him. Something about us bothering you yesterday? I told him the truth, Sarah said quietly. Tyler smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The truth is pretty subjective, isn't it? Like my truth is that we were just trying to be friendly to the new girl. We saw you running alone on a dangerous trail and thought we'd keep you company, make sure you were safe. That's not what happened. And then you fell, Tyler continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Which was unfortunate, but accidents happen. We were actually trying to help you up when that crazy guy showed up and started threatening us. Sarah stared at him in amazement. That's completely... The point is, Tyler interrupted, Mr. Davidson was very understanding when I explained our side of things. He said it sounded like a big misunderstanding. He also said something about new students sometimes having trouble adjusting to new social environments. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. It was clear that Tyler's version of events had been believed over hers, just as she had feared. "But here's the thing, Sarah," Tyler said, leaning forward slightly. "Mr. Davidson also said that if there were any more misunderstandings, any more false accusations, the school would have to consider disciplinary action against the student making them." The threat was clear, and Sarah realized that reporting the incident had actually made her situation worse. Now Tyler and his friends knew she had tried to get them in trouble, and they had been essentially given permission to continue bothering her. "I hope we understand each other," Tyler said, standing up from the table. "I'd hate for you to have any more accidents." As Tyler walked away, Sarah felt tears threatening again. She had done exactly what Marcus had advised, and it had backfired completely. Now she was more isolated and vulnerable than ever. She spent the rest of lunch in the library and managed to avoid any further confrontations for the remainder of the school day. But as she walked to her car in the student parking lot, she noticed Tyler, Jake, and Connor gathered near Tyler's expensive pickup truck, watching her. Sarah hurried to her own car, an older Honda that looked shabby next to the shiny vehicles most of the other students drove. As she fumbled with her keys, she could feel their eyes on her. She managed to get in her car and start the engine, but as she pulled out of the parking space, Tyler's truck roared to life behind her. She told herself it was just a coincidence, but as she drove toward home, the truck stayed behind her, maintaining the same distance. When she turned into her neighborhood, Tyler's truck followed. When she pulled into her driveway, the truck drove slowly past her house before disappearing around the corner. Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The message was clear. They knew where she lived. That evening, she called Marcus from her room, not wanting her parents to overhear the conversation and panic. "How did it go at school?" Marcus asked after she had explained what had happened. "Horrible," Sarah said. "The principal basically accused me of lying, and now Tyler is threatening me. They followed me home, Marcus. They know where I live." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I was afraid something like this might happen," he said finally. "School administrators don't like dealing with problems that might reflect poorly on their programs or their star athletes. So what do I do now? I can't go to the police. They'll just say it's a school matter. I can't go to the school. They've already made it clear whose side they're on." "You're not going to do anything," Marcus said firmly. "I am." "What do you mean?" "I mean it's time for me to have that conversation with Tyler and his friends that I mentioned yesterday. Marcus, I don't want you to get in trouble because of me. I won't get in trouble. But those boys are going to learn that there are consequences for their actions." "How?" "Don't worry about how. Just trust me to handle it." That night, Sarah lay awake again, wondering what Marcus was planning. She was grateful for his help, but she was also scared about what might happen if the situation escalated further. The next morning, she decided to skip her usual run, not wanting to risk another encounter on the trails. Instead, she got ready for school and tried to prepare herself mentally for whatever Tyler and his friends might do. But when she arrived at school, something was different. Tyler was at his usual spot near the entrance with his friends, but when he saw Sarah approaching, he quickly looked away and started talking to Jake about something else. During lunch, Madison's group was unusually subdued. They sat at their normal table, but the loud laughter and cruel commentary that usually characterized their conversations was absent. It wasn't until after school that Sarah began to understand what had happened. She was walking to her car when Ashley Chen approached her, looking nervous and uncomfortable. "Sarah," Ashley said, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Sarah nodded, though she remained wary. "Look, I just wanted to say, what happened the other day, with Tyler and those guys following you, that was messed up. I didn't know they were going to do that." "You didn't have anything to do with it," Sarah said. Maybe not directly, but Madison was talking about you after lunch that first day, about how you didn't belong here, how someone should teach you about fitting in. I think Tyler took that as encouragement. Sarah felt a chill. So this was planned? Ashley looked uncomfortable. Not exactly planned, but Tyler has this thing about impressing Madison. When she talks about not liking someone, he sometimes takes it upon himself to do something about it. Why are you telling me this? Ashley glanced around again, then leaned closer. Because this morning, Tyler came to school looking like he'd seen a ghost. He was telling everyone to stay away from you, that bothering you wasn't worth the trouble. Something happened last night that scared him. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. What happened? I don't know exactly. But Jake was saying something about how Tyler got a visit from someone who made it very clear that you were under protection. Someone who knew things about Tyler that could get him in serious trouble. Ashley paused, studying Sarah's face. Do you know what that was about? Sarah thought about Marcus, about his military background, about his promise to handle the situation. Maybe, she said. Well, whatever it was, it worked. Tyler's telling everyone to pretend you don't exist. Madison's pissed because she wanted to keep messing with you, but Tyler shut that down real quick. As Ashley walked away, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Whatever Marcus had done, it had worked. She was safe, at least for now. That evening, Marcus called her to check in. How was school today? He asked. Much better, Sarah said. Tyler and his friends completely avoided me. What did you do? Marcus chuckled. Let's just say I reminded Tyler that his behavior has been noticed by people who know how to find out interesting information about teenage football stars. What kind of information? The kind that college recruiters don't like to hear about. The kind that can affect scholarships and future opportunities. The kind that parents get very upset about when it's brought to their attention. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You investigated him? I'm good at finding things out, Sarah, and Tyler Morrison has not been the model student that Mr. Davidson thinks he is. There have been other incidents, other complaints that were quietly swept under the rug. But if those incidents became public knowledge, his football career would be over. Among other things, yes. I simply explained to Tyler that his behavior toward you was being documented, and that any further incidents would result in that documentation being shared with some very interested parties. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. She was grateful that the immediate threat was over, but she also realized that Marcus had essentially blackmailed Tyler into leaving her alone. Was that legal? She asked. I didn't threaten him, Marcus said. I simply informed him of potential consequences of his actions. There's a difference. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's life at Desert Vista High School gradually improved. Tyler and his friends gave her a wide berth, and word seemed to spread that she was off limits. Madison still made occasional snide comments, but without Tyler's enforcement, her cruelty lost much of its power. Sarah began to make tentative friendships with other students who, like her, existed on the margins of the school's social hierarchy. She joined the cross-country team and found that her running abilities earned her a measure of respect. But she never forgot the lesson of those first few days, that sometimes, when systems fail to protect the vulnerable, it takes someone willing to step outside those systems to make things right. Marcus became a fixture in her life, checking in regularly and continuing to run the same trails she did. He became something like a protective older brother, always watching out for her welfare without being intrusive. You know, he told her one morning as they finished their runs, you're stronger than you think you are. I didn't feel strong when those boys were bothering me, Sarah replied. Strength isn't about being able to handle everything on your own, Marcus said. It's about knowing when to ask for help and being brave enough to do it. Sarah thought about that as she headed home to get ready for school. She had learned something important about courage, about standing up for yourself, and about the importance of having people in your corner when the world seemed arrayed against you. But she also sensed that the story wasn't over yet. Tyler's resentment toward her was still there, simmering beneath the surface compliance that Marcus's intervention had created. And Madison's social influence remained a constant threat to Sarah's fragile place in the school ecosystem. As she walked into school that morning, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was still to come. 2 months had passed since the incident on the trail, and Sarah had begun to believe that her troubles with Tyler and his group were behind her. She had settled into a comfortable routine at Desert Vista High School, made friends on the cross-country team, and even managed to maintain a decent GPA despite the rocky start to her senior year. Her morning runs with Marcus had become a cherished part of her day. He had taught her basic self-defense techniques and had helped her build confidence both physically and mentally. More importantly, he had shown her that there were adults who would stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't their responsibility to do so. But Sarah's sense of security was about to be shattered in a way she never could have anticipated. It started with a rumor that spread through the school like wildfire. Someone had reported that Tyler Morrison had been seen drinking at a party the previous weekend, and the story had somehow made its way to the football coach. The cross-country season was in full swing, which meant that college recruiters were actively scouting players like Tyler for scholarship opportunities. The rumor turned out to be more than just gossip. Tyler's parents received a call from a college recruiter who had heard concerns about Tyler's character and wanted to discuss them before moving forward with scholarship negotiations. Sarah first learned about this development when Ashley Chen approached her again after school, this time looking genuinely frightened. "Sarah, you need to be careful," Ashley said, glancing around nervously. "Tyler thinks you're the one who reported him to the coach." "What?" Sarah said, confused. "I don't know anything about any party. I wasn't even invited." "That doesn't matter. Madison convinced him that you must have found out somehow, and reported it as revenge for what happened before. Tyler's scholarship offers are in jeopardy, and he's looking for someone to blame." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "But I didn't do anything. I don't even talk to Tyler or any of his friends." "I know that, and you know that, but Tyler doesn't want to hear it. His dad is furious about the scholarship situation, and Tyler is desperate to fix it. He thinks if he can prove you made a false report, he can salvage his reputation." "How would he prove that?" Ashley looked around again, then leaned closer. "He's planning something, Sarah. I don't know what exactly, but he's been talking to Jake and Connor about teaching you a lesson. He wants to make you admit that you reported him, even if you didn't actually do it." "When?" "I think soon. Maybe tonight. They know your schedule, they know when you run, they know when your parents aren't home. Sarah, I'm scared for you." That afternoon, Sarah called Marcus as soon as she got home from school. She explained what Ashley had told her and asked for his advice. "You're not going running alone anymore," Marcus said immediately. "Not until this gets resolved." "But I haven't done anything wrong," Sarah protested. "Why should I have to hide?" "Because sometimes doing nothing wrong isn't enough to protect you from people who are looking for someone to blame. Tyler's in a desperate situation, and desperate people do stupid things. So what do? You stick close to home, you stay around other people, and you let me handle Tyler. Marcus, you can't keep solving my problems for me. This isn't your problem to solve, Sarah. Tyler is escalating because his back is against the wall. That makes him unpredictable and dangerous." That evening, Sarah tried to follow Marcus's advice. She stayed home, did homework, and attempted to have a normal family dinner with her parents. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Around 9 o'clock, her mother went to bed early with a headache, and her father settled into his home office to finish some work projects. Sarah was in her room, supposedly reading, but actually staring out her window at the street below. That's when she saw Tyler's truck parked at the end of the block, just visible under a street light. Her heart started racing. She grabbed her phone and called Marcus. "He's here," she whispered when Marcus answered. "Tyler's truck is parked outside my house." "Stay inside," Marcus said immediately. "Lock your doors. Stay away from windows. I'm on my way." "Marcus, what if—" "Sarah, listen to me. Do not leave that house for any reason. I don't care if they knock on the door. I don't care what they say. You stay inside until I get there." Sarah hung up and crept to her bedroom window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtains. Tyler's truck was still there, but she couldn't see anyone inside it. The cab was too dark, and the tinted windows made it impossible to tell if anyone was even in the vehicle. 20 minutes passed. Sarah was beginning to think that maybe Tyler had just been driving through the neighborhood when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. Someone was rattling the handle of the back door. She crept out of her room and down the hallway, trying not to make any noise. Her father was still in his office with the door closed, and her mother was asleep. The house was mostly dark except for the light from her father's office and a small lamp in the living room. The rattling stopped, but then Sarah heard footsteps moving around the side of the house toward her bedroom window. Her room was on the ground floor, and while the windows were locked, they wouldn't be difficult to break if someone was determined enough. She was reaching for her phone to call 911 when she heard Marcus's voice outside, calm but carrying clearly in the night air. "Gentlemen, I think you're in the wrong neighborhood." Sarah risked a peek through the front window and saw Marcus standing in the street, directly between Tyler's truck and her house. He was wearing dark clothes and seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Tyler, Jake, and Connor emerged from the shadows near her house, looking startled and guilty. "This is a public street," Tyler said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We're not doing anything wrong." "Interesting," Marcus said, not moving from his position. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like 3 young men are skulking around a teenage girl's house in the dark. That seems like something the police would find very interesting." "We weren't skulking," Connor protested. "We were just—" "Checking to see if doors were unlocked?" Marcus interrupted. "Looking for unlocked windows? That sounds like attempted breaking and entering to me." Tyler stepped forward, trying to regain some authority. "Look, man, this doesn't concern you. We just want to talk to Sarah." "At 9:30 at night? While her parents are home? While you're hiding in the shadows?" Marcus shook his head. "That's not talking, Tyler, that's stalking." "You don't know what you're talking about," Tyler said, his voice rising. "She's been spreading lies about us, trying to ruin my reputation. I have a right to defend myself." "By sneaking around her house like a predator?" "I'm not a predator," Tyler shouted, his composure finally breaking. "I'm trying to save my future. Do you know what she's cost me? College recruiters are backing away because of rumors she started." Marcus took a step closer to Tyler, and even from inside the house, Sarah could see Tyler instinctively step back. "Tyler," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge, "you're about to make the biggest mistake of your young life. You're angry, you're scared, and you're looking for someone to blame for problems you created yourself. But if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you take that anger out on an innocent girl, you're going to discover just how wrong you can be." "She's not innocent!" Tyler yelled. She what?" Marcus interrupted. "She reported an assault to school authorities? She defended herself when you and your friends attacked her on a trail? She existed in your vicinity while you made a series of bad choices that caught up with you?" Jake tugged on Tyler's arm. "Dude, let's just go. This is getting weird." But Tyler was too far gone to listen to reason. Months of suppressed anger, combined with the pressure of potentially losing his scholarship opportunities, had pushed him past the point of rational thinking. "I want to hear her say it," Tyler demanded. "I want to hear her admit that she lied about what happened on the trail, that she's been spreading rumors about me." "That's not going to happen," Marcus said simply. Then I guess we have a problem, Tyler said, reaching into his jacket pocket. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Tyler's hand emerged from his pocket, holding something metallic that glinted in the streetlight. Sarah couldn't tell what it was from her position, but Marcus's reaction was immediate and decisive. In one fluid motion, Marcus closed the distance between himself and Tyler, grabbed Tyler's wrist, and twisted. Whatever Tyler had been holding flew out of his hand and clattered onto the asphalt. Tyler cried out in pain and dropped to one knee. Jake and Connor started forward, but Marcus turned his attention to them without releasing Tyler's wrist. I wouldn't, he said quietly. Your friend here just escalated this situation from harassment to assault with a weapon. You really want to add your names to that charge? It's just a knife, Connor protested. He wasn't going to hurt anyone. A knife, Marcus repeated. In the hands of someone who just threatened a minor, outside her home, after dark, while attempting to break and enter. He looked down at Tyler, who was still kneeling on the ground, cradling his twisted wrist. Tyler, you have approximately 30 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't call the police right now, and have you arrested for attempted assault, stalking, harassment, and whatever other charges the district attorney might want to file. I wasn't going to hurt her, Tyler gasped. I just wanted to scare her into telling the truth. The truth about what? About the lies she's been telling. About making up stories to get me in trouble. Marcus released Tyler's wrist and stepped back, but his posture remained alert. Tyler, I'm going to explain something to you, and I want you to listen very carefully. Sarah Martinez has not said a word about you to anyone since the day she reported your assault to the school principal. She hasn't spread rumors, she hasn't talked to reporters, she hasn't contacted college recruiters. Then how did... Your reputation is suffering because of your own actions, not because of anything Sarah did. You think you've been careful, but people notice things. Coaches hear stories. Recruiters ask questions. The only person responsible for your problems is you. Tyler stared up at Marcus in confusion and growing horror. But Madison said, Madison Foster has been playing you, Marcus said bluntly. She's been feeding your paranoia and directing your anger because she enjoys watching you destroy yourself, and you've been too blind to see it. Sarah watched from the window as the truth of Marcus's words sank in. Tyler's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, realization, and finally, despair. My scholarship, Tyler whispered, may or may not be salvageable, Marcus said, but I guarantee it won't be if you continue down this path. Right now, you have a choice. You can walk away from here, get some help for your anger issues, and try to rebuild your reputation through better choices. Or you can continue being Madison Foster's puppet and throw away whatever future you might still have. Tyler struggled to his feet, still holding his wrist. He looked at the knife on the ground, then at Marcus, then at Sarah's house. I messed up, he said quietly. Yes, you did. Multiple times. The question is what you're going to do about it. Tyler looked at Jake and Connor, both of whom were staring at him with expressions of dawning realization. They had been following his lead without really understanding how far he had fallen. Jake, Connor, Tyler said, his voice shaky. We need to go. I need to think. As the three boys walked toward Tyler's truck, Marcus called after them. Tyler. Tyler turned around, his face pale in the streetlight. If I ever see you within 100 yards of Sarah Martinez again, if I hear that you've so much as looked at her sideways, our next conversation will involve the police and the district attorney's office. Are we clear? Tyler nodded without speaking, then got into his truck with his friends and drove away. Marcus stood in the street for several minutes after they left, watching to make sure they didn't come back. Then he walked up to Sarah's front door and knocked softly. Sarah opened the door, her hands shaking slightly. Are you okay? Marcus asked. I think so. Thank you. Again. This should be the end of it, Marcus said. Tyler finally understands that his problems are his own making, And more importantly, he understands the consequences of continuing to blame you for them. What if he doesn't listen? What if he comes back? He won't, Marcus said with quiet certainty. Tyler's not evil, Sarah. He's just been angry and stupid and manipulated by someone who enjoys chaos. Tonight he realized how close he came to throwing his entire future away. That's going to scare him straight. Over the following weeks, Marcus proved to be right. Tyler avoided Sarah completely at school, and the rumors about him stopped being about her and started being about his own recent behavior. Word got around that Tyler Morrison had been found outside a classmate's house late at night with a knife, and while the details were sketchy, the basic story was damaging enough. Madison Foster tried to maintain her influence over Tyler, but he had finally seen through her manipulations. Without Tyler as her enforcer, Madison's power to make Sarah's life miserable evaporated. Tyler did manage to salvage one of his college scholarship offers, though not from his first-choice school. He spent the rest of senior year keeping his head down and trying to rebuild his reputation through community service and better behavior. Sarah, meanwhile, flourished. She finished the cross-country season strong, earned good grades, and even began dating a boy from her English class who appreciated her quiet intelligence and gentle nature. On the morning of graduation, Sarah went for one last run on the desert trails with Marcus. They had maintained their friendship throughout the rest of senior year, and he had become something like the protective older brother she had never had. "So what's next?" Marcus asked as they cooled down near the trailhead. "College in the fall. University of Arizona. I got a partial scholarship for cross-country." "I'm proud of you, Sarah. You know that, right?" "For getting a scholarship? For getting through this year. For standing up for yourself. For not letting other people's problems become your problems." Sarah thought about the scared, lonely girl who had sat in that cafeteria 8 months earlier, feeling out of place and vulnerable. "You saved me," she said quietly. "No," Marcus said firmly. "You saved yourself. All I did was level the playing field. You did more than that. Maybe. But the important thing is that you learned you don't have to face things alone. There are people who will stand up for what's right even when it's not their fight." As they walked back toward the neighborhood, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons this difficult year had taught her. She had learned about courage, about asking for help when she needed it, and about the importance of having people in her life who would stand up for her when she couldn't stand up for herself. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is trust someone else to help you. And that accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. Years later, when Sarah was working as a teacher herself, she would think back on this experience whenever she encountered a student who was being bullied or marginalized. She would remember Marcus's quiet strength, his willingness to intervene when institutions failed, and his understanding that sometimes protection requires action outside normal channels. She would also remember Tyler, and how quickly a young person could be led astray by anger, fear, and bad influences. She made it a point to reach out to students who seemed to be struggling, knowing that early intervention could prevent them from making the kind of mistakes that could haunt them for years, and she never forgot the lesson that predators target those who appear to be alone and defenseless. She made sure her students knew that asking for help was not just acceptable but necessary, and that there would always be adults willing to stand up for them when they needed protection. The morning of her college graduation, Sarah received a text from Marcus. "Proud of you, kid. Always knew you'd do great things." She smiled as she read it, remembering the scared 17-year-old who had stumbled on a desert trail and found herself rescued by a stranger who cared enough to get involved. That girl had grown into a confident young woman who understood the difference between being alone and being vulnerable, and who knew that the strongest people are often those who are wise enough to accept help when they need it. The story had ended the way the best stories do, not with revenge or violence, but with growth, understanding, and the knowledge that there are people in the world willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's not easy or convenient to do so. And perhaps most importantly, it had shown her that sometimes, when the systems that are supposed to protect us fail, it takes individual courage and intervention to make things right. Marcus had taught her that being a protector doesn't require a uniform or a title. It just requires the willingness to act when action is needed and the strength to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves.